Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our next live session. I'll be your producer for our session, but before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Microsoft Reactor channel. With that, I'll turn it over to our speaker for today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, good morning, afternoon, maybe evening, the middle of the night, wherever you're connecting from. Thank you so much for joining in this series where it's all about Copilot and agents. We're doing this together with Microsoft Reactor, and our goal is getting you from zero to hero in the exciting world of generative AI. Today is the last session in the series, and if you've been with us throughout the series, then you are really close to becoming that hero in generative AI. Now, today is maybe a little bit off topic for some of you, and we don't want to scare you away, but it's going to be about GitHub Copilot, so one of the generative AI tools, a little bit more targeting developers, as you can see here, because we're going to talk about app development. But the good news is that even if you're not a developer, GitHub Copilot is probably one of your next amazing tools that you're going to use every single day, because there's just a ton of use cases available for developers, DevOps engineers, cloud admins, and traditional system administrators. My name is Peter de Tender, originally from Belgium, but presenting from the Seattle area, working for Microsoft as a lead technical trainer, which means I'm providing training to our customers across the globe using virtual platform every single day. Out of the training world, my background, I would say, is primarily Azure architecting, Azure DevOps. That's why I love GitHub pretty much. And obviously also talking quite a lot about AI nowadays. We have an active YouTube channel where I'm supported by my good friend from India, Juliet, where she's going to take care of any possible questions you have. And if we do have some extra time available, maybe I can answer some of those questions by using some extra demos. So just, I would say, make use of that, and thanks for joining. Now, it's all about learning. I mean, that's in the end why we're doing this. I do this because I just love presenting. And if you hear me saying about, Peter, you're connecting from Seattle, what's happening? It's Thanksgiving in the Americas. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But first of all, it's 6 a.m. for me, so not all that bad. And I just love talking about technology and inspiring anyone who loves to use technology. And since you're here, and I got word that we got a pretty good audience, so thanks for joining. But in the end, it's not just about the 30 minutes and picking up new ideas. Why we have this massive amount of resources on the short link aka.ms/copilot and agents FZTH. So that's from zero to hero. Or you can grab that QR code, why not? And from there, you get redirected to a subset of our massive Learn platform, where you can take your own time to go through companion material, which means you can read through modules, you can go through some practice tests, you might find some links to specific exercises, assuming that for today you already have a Copilot license, and I'll talk a bit about that in the next couple of minutes. I got a pretty easy agenda, and the easy part is that I'm gonna get you introducing into GitHub Copilot, so a little bit of a meet and greet, you could say, so super quick introduction. And then from there, it's followed by zooming in on how to actually use it, where I'm primarily using Visual Studio Code, but it's not the only platform where you can use it. And then since it's, I think, really still magical to me, I would like to spend most of the time that we have available to do live demos and showing you a lot of different capabilities. So that, I would say, let's take it away and start with a little meet and greet of GitHub Copilot. Copilot is using generative AI. And again, if you've been here since the start, you already know what generative AI is. It means it's your virtual assistant. And again, for developers, DevOps engineers, I call them code writers overall. And even on top of that, basically anyone who does anything with scripts. It allows for code generation, writing documentation, explaining code projects, and even transforming code from one framework, one platform into another, using different development languages. And again, if you're a cloud admin, you can probably think about like, does it speak Azure command line, AWS command line? What about complex Kubernetes files and so much more? And the good news is you can do all of that with GitHub Copilot. So it's a lot of technical capabilities, but I managed to even find some, I would say, more business related scenarios as well, because in the end, it's not just about writing code. And that's also what I wanted to emphasize. Now, if you think about why is this important? Well, again, first of all, for all those use cases, right? But next to that, depending a bit how you come in, but assuming that you're going to use it out of your day-to-day job, it means that you need to go for the paid version, the license. There is also a free edition, which I describe as it's pretty cool to use. First of all, anything that you get for free and that's doing amazing things, I think that's just a big win. But next to that, if you go like, well, we're not 100% sure if we're going to invest in it out of the company, well, maybe a little bit after hours, maybe during the weekend, maybe your hobby developing project, what everyone calls vibe coding now, right? Maybe that could be a good start with the free edition. And that's, I would say, the short listing up we have here. So you can go to our docs, and I didn't include the link here, but maybe Juliet might be able to grab it for me. So I would say the starting point, if you're working as an individual developer or DevOps engineer, or again, code writer, then I could recommend start with the free edition. It's going to give you a lot of capabilities, but at the same time, it's a bit limited in compute capacity. And that's where you can move to a Pro edition or even the Pro Plus, where there's a little difference in features and obviously also in a monthly cost. If you're coming in from a business/corporate perspective, you could hook up into your GitHub Enterprise and then going for Copilot Business Edition or Copilot Enterprise. And as you can see here, not going to read from the slide, but as you can see here, there are some fine differences between all those different editions. But in the end, if you just want to get started, if you want to replicate actually some of the demos I'll walk you through, you can do that with a free edition. And I'm pretty sure that once you start using it, even maybe for an hour, you're going to get so like blown away how amazing it actually is. And then from there, you're going to start using it a little bit more. So that's the little meet and greet. So now you know that it's generative AI. It uses large language models, and I'll show you some of that throughout the demos. And then also that it has different licensing options where if you want to activate, I didn't mention, but you can create a free GitHub account. And then you navigate to github.com/copilot and you can activate the free edition. And then obviously about the same, but if it's an enterprise account out of your business, your company, then you probably might need to ask for that license because you cannot link the free edition to your corporate account. Pretty obvious. Next part is looking a little bit into one of the so many supported development environments, where I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as our Microsoft, at least one of the two Microsoft development environments. And VS Code, again, first of all, because it's super popular. Next to that, it's super easy to use and it's super powerful. Now, if you think about any of those job roles, a developer, a DevOps engineer, and maybe cloud admin, system administrator, maybe you're already using Visual Studio Code. So what's the idea here? You have already VS Code, you probably know about extensions, and you're going to install the Copilot GitHub extensions as well. From there, you have chat integration, you have what we call that conversational context, and for example, you could also use what we call inline chat. And you're going to switch across different language models, where you'll find out even in a little bit of a demo that I'm going to jump into probably the next minute. It's going to show you different outcomes. And that's also, I would say, a little bit of an important message that in the end, it's based on generative AI, which means that it might not always be 100% up to what you expect. And that's where the prompting, pretty sure if you, again, were here since the start or just already up to speed on generative AI, you probably know what prompting stands for. Now back to our VS Code. So a lot of different capabilities, already mentioned chat, already mentioned inline chat. You can use your natural language to write code, and I'll try to show you an example of that. And then you're going to switch back and forth and really using your GitHub Copilot as that virtual assistant. Another example that you can use, and I'll walk you through that, is using it as a replacement for searching for information. So you can integrate pretty much anything that you do as, again, a day-to-day developer or any of the other job roles, and just doing all of that out of your VS Code environment. And then probably you might have some questions around what's this whole agent mode, or what about developing agents? Now, it's a bit of a twofold question, I would say. So first of all, yes, I'll show you agent mode out of GitHub Copilot, where agent mode really means that instead of you running like a sequence of prompts, you basically move it into a story. You hand the story over to GitHub Copilot, and it's going to analyze it. It's going to transform it into to-do tasks. And from there, it's actually helping you writing documentation, creating code, maybe transforming code, doing some troubleshooting if the app is not immediately working, like all that cool stuff that just makes it more fun for you as a developer and DevOps engineer and all the others to continue working the same way as you do today, but maybe better quality, maybe even higher quality, doing the same task faster, which means you got much more time available to work on other things, maybe more prioritizing things, and anything else that just makes it fun to start using it. And then maybe eventually looking into building your own agents. And that's where you can use GitHub Copilot to literally use prompting, like, hey, I want to build a generative AI agent. Can you help me with that? Where it's going to give you what we call the scaffolding, like literally the project setup. You could use planning mode, for example, to do that, where it's going to move and interact with your GitHub repos and creating a project and allowing you to create issues, work items, that kind of things. You could also integrate your own knowledge. And one of the examples, which I don't have in the demo for now, but just a little tip here, if you start using GitHub Copilot a little bit more, and you go like, well, it's not always up to speed for just developing work or building agents, look into Copilot instructions, markdown setup out of the documentation. What it allows you to do is bringing in not only the large language model knowledge information, but now also tweaking it, tuning it a bit to maybe your expectations. Maybe you have specific naming conventions. Maybe you have specific requirements that you need to follow when you're developing applications. And you can move all that in a Copilot instructions file. And that's dramatically moving up the quality of the work because it's a lot closer to your expectations or the business expectations. So with that, I'm going to jump into a series of demos. I got about 20 minutes to go, and I'm going to walk you through a few different scenarios where I'm going to use some sample code. It's not always full workable, although some of them are fully workable. But I'm going to show you just a series of tasks where I think as a day-to-day developer, DevOps engineer, cloud admin, sysadmin, you're probably going to recognize some of that. The starting point here is imagining that you're like a junior developer, and junior doesn't mean that you're like a 16-year-old kid. Maybe you graduated with a computer science degree. You're like 21, 23, 24, depending how many years you needed to get that degree, right? Or maybe you have a lot of developer experience in some development language, and now you're part of a new team. Maybe you just shifted roles and your organization gives you access to GitHub Copilot. Well, now you get access to a repo, you open the repo in VS Code, and from here you go like, well, I have no idea how to do this. I don't recognize code. I have no idea what the project is about, but I do have my Copilot on the side. So first of all, let me take a little step back because I talked about the install. So if you go into extensions, search for GitHub Copilot, and going to make this just a little bit bigger for now, where you're going to see that you have two different ones. Now, this is important. You need to install the two extensions, and I'm pretty sure it's actually installing automatically those two. The first one is basically checking your license. Do you have the free edition? Do you have the Pro Plus, or maybe the Enterprise edition? And the chat is really the chat conversation, which is typical for generative AI applications. So you install those two. And from there, you're going to see two different icons. This one is opening the chat window. And then the other one, which could become important, is down here. That's a little statistical view where first of all, it's going to show you if you're connected, and then it also shows you your compute capacity as I describe it. Now, you might need to check the docs to find out like what are the capabilities, what do I have available. Where you can see in my setup here, I'm not at all reaching the maximum capacity for traditional inline suggestions or chat, but I'm consuming about 20% of premium requests, where premium is typically the agent mode, which in the end provides and consumes more compute power, but it's also doing even more amazing things than just prompting. And then sometimes the large language model might also be seen as a premium feature. So we open up our Copilot chat, and we have a couple of options here as well, where for now I'm going to use ask mode. So ask mode is basically the prompting where you're going to ask a question, you're going to wait a couple of seconds, and Copilot is going to provide you with an answer. You can do agent mode. I'll show you that in one of my last demos. And planning is what I mentioned before. It allows you to use sharing, again, a series of questions, prompts, providing a scenario, and it's going to interact with GitHub planning, or the project management as we call it, allowing you to create step-by-step tasks. And if you have interaction with the GitHub backend, it's going to allow you to create issues. But for now, we're in ask mode. And then the last one before I'm going to kick off my prompt is switching across language models. Now, I'm fortunate to have obviously a pretty extensive list of large language models that I can choose from. If you do this in the free edition, you can switch, but you won't have this long list. If you do this with a paid version, you have a few more options. If you do this with the enterprise edition, it's depending on your enterprise GitHub Copilot policies, where someone within the organization can define which language models you can use or maybe cannot use. If you have multiple options available, I would recommend switching back and forth to again validate which of the language models are working better for your specific scenario. Now again, back to our imaginary scenario where you're a junior developer, whatever that means, right? And you look at the code and you don't really know like what's happening here. What I'm focusing on is the starting point, I think, for a lot of projects. Just give me more information. So what we can do here is running a prompt. Can you explain this project? Explaining gets understood, interpreted by the large language model, natural language processing behind the scenes. And if everything works out fine, there we go. It's going to look into some references like using the project files, and it's trying to provide me with some details. So from here, it's telling me this is a Cheesecake IoT monitoring system. It's a .NET 6 application, which is super relevant because now we immediately know it's the C#.NET. And yes, maybe there's an opportunity to migrate to some newer version. What's the purpose of the app? What are the key components? So we see it's like simulating some IoT devices. We're interconnecting with Azure IoT Hub. And again, so much more information. And I can make this a little bit bigger. So if you want to read through, I would say I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the whole idea is we can get an explanation. But from here, you might go like, well, what if I want to reuse this? Because this is super useful. I want to keep this. Well, what you would normally do is grabbing this and probably selecting everything and then copy pasting it, maybe creating a README file. But again, I told you that one of those immediate use cases is doing the same job as you did before, but now relying on a virtual assistant to help you with that. What I mean is, instead of me copy pasting, why not asking Copilot to help me with that? Even better, if my repo, and we don't really see the repo part, but imagine this is a GitHub repo where when you think about GitHub repos, it's typically a README file. Well, I do have my README, but it's using Markdown. So if I copy this over and I move it in here, then I lose that nice Markdown. But wait a minute, we talked about code writing. What if we can ask Copilot, can you produce the same explanation using Markdown syntax? Well, now you can see that it's a little bit stubborn. It's not listening. And sometimes this happens. I mean, what you can try here is switching to another model. So I'm now switching from Claude, which is an Anthropic French AI company model, into GPT from OpenAI. And I'm going to ask the same thing. Can you rewrite the explanation in Markdown syntax? And then obviously hoping that it's listening a little bit better, and it's still not doing it. So I'm not going to bore you with that. You see the result here. This is literally the same explanation, but then produced Markdown, and it would allow me to literally move everything in. Last example here is making it a little bit more advanced, and it's not about the more advanced prompt, but I'm going to show you, and then I'll switch to my other example, and then coming back. What if you have specific requirements? So what I'm doing here, I'll make it a little bit bigger, is providing more detailed instructions. Can you generate documentation for this project? Basically the same, but instead of explaining, we're using documenting. Start with a summary for business stakeholders like CXO, CEO, CTO, CFO, that's what we mean. Next, create a more deep technical overview documentation for developers, and we provide a structure. Technical summary, code snippets, and pretty much anything we want. And then preferably in Markdown syntax. You see, I keep trying it because I know that it's possible to do that, and it's making my life so much easier. While this is running, you don't have to wait. Look at that, there we go. All of a sudden it starts recognizing Markdown. But that's indeed what it's about. So let me finish this one before switching back and forth. So we have the Cheesecake monitoring system. We knew that it recognizes executive summary, key business benefits, technical overview for our senior developers, platform details, all the code snippets with explanations, and it just keeps going. I think this is pretty powerful, saving me quite a lot of time. So this was the first part, using it to generate documentation, maybe documenting, explaining, clarifying things. But that's not 100% code writing. So what we can do here is now moving to a different application. This is, as you can see from the title, it's simulating a banking account application. What we can do here, just like any developer DevOps work, is running a little code validation. So I'm doing .NET build, which is the fact that it's a .NET application, C#. I can validate my code is all successful, it's compiling, so that means it's all fine. And then if you want to see it in action, we're going to do .NET run, and it's going to show you quite some output on the terminal, but it's just simulating like bank account transfers. And you can see that some of those transfers are failing. It's not a failure in the demo. It's built on purpose, where if I move up a little bit more, you're going to see that we're doing some payment movements from one account to the other. And that's literally why a bank app is probably built for. So the app works all good. And moving into the code writing piece, well, it's a banking app, and we could again start with clarifications, but assume that we already worked on this project. If I have a bank account, maybe I want to add some, bank locations to my application. So I could now again go into Copilot. I'm still in ask mode, and I can ask, can you generate an employee class? Why? Because we got a bank account, customer facing, but we probably also have a bunch of bank account company employees. And now we're expanding the app where maybe as a bank employee, you might get access to some customer information. I remember a time where I had to walk in like a bank location and providing one of those little papers, slips to actually wire some money or pay an invoice or something. And that's where probably in the banking system, we might keep track of our employees. So what it's doing here, it's using the code that we already have. It's recognizing the bank account app. And now instead of creating or editing the public class bank account, it's adding a class employee. Now, all this information, and it looks pretty complete, is again based on information from the large language model. Now, it's providing me first name, last name, pretty obvious. There's email, department, position, but maybe I want to add something more into it. Now, first of all, I'm going to save this so I can use any of these short clickable buttons here. apply in editor, which typically means that it's going to overwrite code in my already existing code, or it's going to offer you to move it inside the same file, or it's allowing you to do traditional copy paste, which means that now instead of running the whole update, where now I'm not going to overwrite my bank account, but I could still create like a employee class. This is my source control kicking in. And I'm just going to call it employee CS. And from there, we could do a lot of other things with it. Now, if you're not all that happy with the suggestion, then obviously you don't change anything, you don't keep it. That's up to you to decide. From here, you can ask pretty much any other questions, writing methods, creating classes, creating constructors, anything else that you wanted to do. You could also go into your existing code view. So let me select a little snippet of code here. And by the way, something I didn't mention yet, over here we have a selection, like a context actually, where depending on where I am in my application, it's recognizing like line 7 to 15, or if I'm not selecting anything, I'm just in the file, it's using it. And by the way, you can also use the context option, and you can add more scenarios into it. So you can point, for example, to other files and folders. If you already have an application that you want to use as a reference, you could tell Copilot to go and look into some reference files over there. The instructions is what I mentioned before. That's the GitHub instructions, GitHub Copilot instructions. And the assumption is that you store it in a .github file. That's the default. I call it the system folder. For GitHub, it's also, if you're a bit into actions pipelines, where it creates the workflows. You can upload screenshots. You can add some problem statements into it, all that to help you. And again, replacing some of your work and allowing you to speed up your tasks. Another example, because you could now think like, wait a minute, Peter, you've been talking for like 10 minutes and you started with, it's not just for developers, but all the demos I did was targeting developers. So we're going to take it up a little bit and imagine that we need to move this app into a container. I'm going to start a new conversation, and that's just generative AI best practice. Why? Because there's conversational context. And the more you're going to keep in that conversation, it's obviously useful because it's sort of remembering. But at the same time, it's also creating confusion, and that might end up in hallucination, as we call it. So it's a good practice to clear your chat and then starting with a new task. Now, I talked about containers, just an example, where ultimately we're going to build containers. I'm not going to do it live. Next to that, we might need to move it into an Azure scenario. And I hope I can help a little bit of your cloud admins on the other side of the screen, understanding and seeing some ideas what's actually becoming possible. Now, if you know a bit about Docker, it means we need a Docker file. So again, if you know more about what you have been doing so far, the more information you provide to Copilot, obviously, the more accurate the information will be. But what if you never did anything with containers? You don't know about a Docker file. You don't know a lot about Azure command line, and maybe you don't know about Azure template syntax. Nothing to worry about because we can just prompt for that. I need to move this app into a container image. From there, I need to run it in Azure using both Azure command line and template-based deployment. Can you help me with all of this? I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see a bit what's happening. So it's again analyzing the prompt, and it's going to start from the application itself. So it's going to loop through, it recognizes it's a .NET 8 console app, and there we go, it's creating a Docker file. It's telling me the .NET 8, so there is that recognition, right? We're going to use the project and everything that we expect in a Docker file. From there, it's also helping me with a Docker ignore file, which means we don't need to move all code into the Docker container. And I don't need to worry about that. Next to that, it's giving me some test scripting code, Docker build like a command line task, and Docker run to test my container. And then from there, we're going to move into Azure syntax. Right now, it's using Azure command line because that's what I asked for. But imagine that you have a background in PowerShell. You might now go, can you transform the Azure CLI into Azure PowerShell code? And no surprise, it's still going to do that. I hope this all makes sense, and I need to watch over the time a little bit. I'm going to use another 5 minutes where I'm going to show you about the same, but using agent mode. So again, what is agent mode? It's allowing you to run about the same tasks that you're doing every single day, but now semi-automated. So it's not 100% autonomous. It's not doing things for you without you knowing it, but you're still in control, which I think is important. In generative AI, we call this human in the loop, where you're going to provide the scenario, but then you also watch over what's actually happening. To show you how crazy cool this is, I'm going to create a new application from scratch. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this the, let's do reactor game. Yes, we're going to build a game. Totally new folder. I'm opening up my VS Code. Looks a bit weird on screen, but I guess that's fine. And right now it's agent mode. So it looks like it's listening like, oh, Peter, you want to use agent mode? Well, no, what I find out is since the last couple of weeks, when you open a project in a new version or new VS Code window, it's suggesting offering agent mode. So what we're going to do is playing, or at least asking, to build a little game. How does it work? I mentioned you're going to create a story. So what is my story? It brings me back to my youth, where as a kid, I played arcade games a lot. If you're too young, you don't know what arcade games are, I'm sorry, maybe you could ask Copilot to clarify, right? I want to build a Python code app which tests me on my shooting reflexes. Help me developing a game which does the following. Ask me for the player name. In the middle of the screen, I want a shooter. Anywhere random, it needs to drop a target. And then the player uses the spacebar to simulate a shoot. And then depending on the reaction, you win or you lose. That's really what we want to play. So I'm going to grab this. This is my story. Don't need this anymore. I'm going to hand it over to the agent. I paste it in. I don't provide any other details. And remember, there's no sample code, nothing. It's just a fresh folder. And what it's going to do here is looking into the code. It's creating a Python game, and it provides me, oh, that was a bit too fast. It provides me an integration with Pygame, which is like a Python framework library. So that looks already promising. It's going to install it if I don't have it yet. It's recognizing the game features, the game flow, implementation, and it's already creating. And by the time I scroll down, it already created Python code. We have the code syntax over here. I'm not going to bore you with the code syntax, but it looks like, at least a bit I know about Python, that it seems and feels like Python code. And then it tells me the next step, install Pygame. Okay, but I have no idea how to do that. Oh, but it's telling me how to do that. Remember in the previous demo, we had the same view where we could use code generation, copy pasting, moving it in, but now it's moving it into a terminal action. So the agent piece is generating the code. And then technically, if you want, I could be a bit more specific in my prompting to maybe allow an approval that it doesn't need to ask me to click the button and actually running that task for me. But I guess we're ready to run the game, and let's see what happens. It's starting the game. It looks like it's starting. It's not doing anything. Oh, it's asking me for my name down here. That's a bit weird. My name is Peter. Well, it looks like something is not 100% working. So I'm going to close it, and I'm going to tell the game started. Black screen, nothing happening. Can you fix it? And what it's going to do now is looping through, and from there, trying to troubleshoot, and then probably providing some fix. So as you can see, it's already scanning code, it's updating code. We're going to keep it. We're going to try and run it again. And it's a little bit stubborn. It's trying to start up, I think. Asking for the name. It's trying to do something. I think it's my resolution. I got this in a GitHub repo. If you go to github.com/petender, the most recent repo that I have actually has the same sample code. So I guess it's my resolution a bit for the presentation, not showing me everything that I wanted to show. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up because we're running out of time a little bit. First of all, thanks for joining. I hope you learned a bit about the different scenarios. We talked about how amazing generative AI is, where today it's about GitHub Copilot, your virtual assistant for developers, DevOps engineers, cloud admins, any possible cloud, and system administrators, a little bit of PowerShell Bash. That would be the scenarios. If you want to learn more, if you want to read through a lot more context, remember we have that short link, AKMS, Copilot and Agents, FZTH, or grab that QR code, which probably makes it a lot easier, where you can grab more information, go through some practice labs, maybe some prep for some certification, and anything else you want to get out of it. I want to thank you for being here. My name was Peter Ditender, and joined by my amazing colleague, Juliet. I hope you had as much fun as I did presenting while you moderating all the questions. Thanks for the participation. And I would say thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Thanksgiving if you're joining from the US, and hope to see you in any of our future sessions. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.